So, by now you guys all know that climate change is happening. And you know that beyond the change in temperature, these effects are going to include the loss of glaciers and permafrost, rising sea levels, and more extreme weather events. Changes that are going to drastically affect the ecosystems on Earth. There will also be economic impacts. And they won't all be bad. Some people think that because Canada is going to have an increased growing season, climate change could be beneficial to agriculture here. One geographer at UCLA has even predicted that by 2050, Canada will be a superpower. But there are going to be negative effects here as well. For instance, northern species that will lose their habitat, like in the Arctic where the loss of sea ice is reducing the habitat available to polar bears to hunt, which has also led to the prediction that polar bears are going to be extinct around the same time Canada achieves world domination. But tropical species might suffer too, and the reason is that most tropical environments tend to have pretty stable temperatures, and species that live there have evolved in those conditions. So tropical organisms often aren't physiologically equipped to handle big changes in temperature. But today I wanted to tell you about another effect, one that's happening here and now. It's called ecological mismatch, and it all has to do with seasonal timing in temperate zones. Now, to understand ecological mismatch, you have to know a little bit about how animals time seasonal events, like budding, blooming, migrating, and breeding. Take tree swallows. These birds spend the winter in Central America, and in March and April they migrate north, arriving in Canada to breed. They build nests and lay their eggs in May, and by the first day of June the eggs start to hatch. By August, the babies are grown and have left the nest, and the birds head back south to Central America to start it all over again the next year. Now, it's no coincidence that nearly every tree swallow around here has a June birthday. And the reason has to do with what they eat: flying insects. See, mom and dad catch insects in flight and bring them back to feed the chicks. And when you have 6 babies that grow to adult size in just 2 weeks, you need a lot of food. Now, June happens to be when flying insects are most abundant. So, through natural selection, swallows have evolved to get here right on time to build a nest and settle down so that their hungry chicks hatch right around the time that the insects are booming. So how does this work? How does an individual swallow know when it's time to migrate, time to build a nest, and time to lay eggs? Well, it all has to do with day length. You've probably all noticed that day length changes with the seasons, and in migrating birds like tree swallows, the changes in day length trigger hormonal changes that ultimately cause changes in seasonal behavior like migration and breeding. Most of the time this works out great, but not always. And this was something that I found out this year when I was working with a team of researchers at the Queen's University Biological Station, where we were studying the tree swallows. On the first day of June, the eggs started to hatch just like they do every year. Fast forward to 5 days later, we start to find dead chicks, and by the end of June, 3/4 of the nest in the population had failed. So why did this massive failure happen? Well, again, it all has to do with timing. Now this year, June was unusually cold, especially the first week. We had a period where the temperature stayed below normal for about 5 days in a row. Why does this matter? Well, it really affects flying insects. When the temperature is below about 18 degrees Celsius, the insects don't fly. And tree swallows need flying insects. That's how they catch their food. So days below 18 degrees mean no food for tree swallows. Going hungry for 1 day isn't so bad, but 5 days in a row is disastrous. And as a matter of fact, a study just came out showing how these cold snaps affect the tree swallow populations in upstate New York. Researchers have been studying the birds there for 25 years, and they found that the population crashes every 5 years or so. And the cause is that these crash years are years where the temperature dips below 18 degrees Celsius for at least 3 days in a row. Okay, so you might think that climate change is going to be good for tree swallows. We'll have fewer cold snaps, so they'll have fewer bad years. But what if climate change affects the timing of the insect boom that takes place each June? I told you that swallows time their breeding based on day length. Well, insects usually emerge based on temperature. So with climate change, the temperature is getting warmer earlier in the year, and the insects are also emerging earlier. And what happens to the tree swallows then? Their timing will no longer match up with their insect feast. Well, maybe the tree swallows will decline up here, maybe they'll start to breed further south. Or maybe they'll evolve to change their seasonal cycle and get here earlier. The question becomes, will tree swallows and other organisms be able to evolve fast enough to respond to the changes that we're causing? It's one that we don't know the answer to, and in fact, all we do know is that these changes are coming. That's all for now. Don't forget that quiz number 9 is due this Sunday, July 14th, and your last discussion activity, discussion number 6, is also due on Sunday. Stay cool, everyone.